Record. Let's do it. Welcome everybody to another session of Tequila Talks with El Padrino and the Tequila Mafia. We have Jesse Estes joining us. We're going to be talking about Ocho Tequila. Ocho Tequila, the mastermind behind this was Carlos and his father, Thomas Estes. May his soul rest in peace. He gave us a great gift, a gift of awesome tequila, very delicious. And it was sad to hear the news, but the legacy continues on with Jesse. So let's hope that everything stays really good and that you probably come up with something better, right? A little bit different expressions, different projects. So how are you, Jesse?
Yeah, man. I'm doing well. Thanks again, Ernesto, for organizing this, and especially thank you guys for being here and taking your time. I know a couple of people mentioned California, and people. Sounds like people are all around the country. So, thanks for being here.
Yeah, we got some from California, Washington, Florida, Texas, New York. We're all over the place. And where are you joining us from, Jesse?
Awesome. I see Chris is here from Seattle. Chris, good to see you. Definitely some familiar faces here today. I'm actually in Sao Paulo today, so I'm in Brazil. I just arrived today. My best friend is getting married here this weekend, so I am in town for the wedding. Sarah's in Charleston. Very cool town. I went there for the first time last year. So guys, for me, this is really, I can talk about whatever's interesting. I can just go into the story of Tequila Ocho, although I think at least a few of you I know have heard the story before. I could talk about, some of the things we'll be tasting, but really I'm curious to know what you guys want to talk about, because that's obviously why we're here.
Yeah, well, not everybody knows the story behind Ocho, how the creation, came to be, how your father fell in love with tequila, and how he got together with Carlos to create the brand. So let's start off with a little bit of history on that one.
Sounds good. Let me do this. Can you make me co-host, and then I can share my screen, just share some photos.
I'm trying to see how it. All right, there we go. I think you're good.
Everybody see an agave field?
Yes.
On the screen. One of the reasons I like this photo, actually, before we even jump into the story of Tequila Ocho, is, and some of you, again, if this is repetition for any of you guys, apologies, but some people may not know this, that Tequila Ocho, besides being a single field tequila, actually, as far as I know, the first ever single field tequila in the world, meaning that every single batch of tequila we produce will come from a different single field, very much borrowing this concept from wine, right? The single vineyard wines that really kind of highlight the terroir of those specific parcels, those specific plots of land in which the grapes, or in this case, the agaves, were grown. So we do single field production, but we actually don't harvest the whole single field. We only go through and harvest the ripest plants from each field. Now, this field was a great example of very, very, very ripe plants. So it doesn't take even, a very trained eye to see that in these fields, if you look at the base of the plants, these pencas, these agave leaves, are actually turning brown, decomposing. And if you look in this field, we've left it so late to harvest. Some of these agaves, these two in the front, have actually already died. So we left them too long and they've decomposed fully. But one of the reasons that we only harvest the ripest agaves from each field is that there'll be a high sugar content in those agaves, and there'll also be a high acidity level. So if we were to walk through this field right now, you can actually smell almost like a vinegar type aroma in the air, and that is basically the concentration of sugars in these piñas, in the plants while they're still in the ground, while they're still alive. They'll start to concentrate on the outside of the plant. I think I have some photos maybe later in the slideshow. You can see these brown or kind of red spots on the outside of the plant, and you can smell it, you can touch it, it's wet to the touch, you can taste it, and it's got this really kind of nice, I think it's quite pleasant, vinegar note to it. So that's the sugars concentrating on the outside of the plant, and a type of fermentation actually starting in the fields. So it really gives us, in the end, a lot of complexity. This high level of sweetness of sugar balanced out by this high level of acidity, and between those two, what we hope to create is this beautiful structure, and within that room for complexity, nuance, and body. So that's just kind of a note on the ripeness of the plants, the maturity of the plants being used for Tequila Ocho. So these will be hand-picked. Again, this field, probably most of this field would have been harvested. Some of the fields we only harvest 60, 70%, depending on how many are super ripe, overripe at that point in time. This is what I mean when I say single field. So we're going to be tasting a few different harvests, a few different fields shortly, and exploring what effect, if any, these different terroirs from these different fields will have on the plants, and in turn on the tequila. And guys, feel free to jump in. Any questions, just interrupt me by all means. Questions or comments.
Hey Jesse, on those agaves that we were looking at there, were they dry farmed? It looks like they were kind of older, and I don't know, what do you think the age of those agaves are approximately?
I could actually check for that specific field what the age was, but you know, there's a very strange thing with agave, that age, so how many years ago they were planted, and maturity actually, it doesn't necessarily, there's not a specific. These could be 6 years old and fully ripe, fully ripe, or they could be 9 years old and fully ripe. Their age doesn't necessarily denote maturity. So for us, it's an average of 8 years, but again, we can have fully ripe agaves as early as 6 years, and in some cases, fields that take close to 10 years, really, till we're at that point. So it really depends, not even on the field, but just plant to plant. It's very different. So I don't know if that answers your question. I would say in this field, these were probably between 8 and 9 years old, would be my guess. But again, I can look that up.
Yeah, no, that's good. They look like they're kind of up there, getting toward, you know, very mature. Yeah,
this is an extreme example, which is one of the reasons I like this photo for sure.
I just saw the size of the piña in that the guy's hand there. That was, yeah, kind of.
Which is just an absolutely tiny piña, which again, you know, size, age, and maturity are not necessarily linked. So that could be a 10-year-old agave that only weighs, you know, 12 kilos or whatever. Or it could be, you know, we could see a 6-year-old agave that weighs 110 kilos, you know, 200 and some pounds. So yeah, it just depends. Every plant will mature at a different rate and will be a different size and a different sugar content.
So what are some of the factors that contribute to the variance in maturity and size? Is it the terroir, the fields, the amount of water that rains, and how hot it is that year?
I think it's all of the above and more. And, you know, because if you really look at some of these fields, and again, remembering that the blue agave has been classed essentially as a monoculture, right? So these are all genetically almost the same plant. And yet these two plants, you know, right next to each other, a meter or two apart, in the same field, are maturing at a different rate. And they're going to be different sizes, as we can see from this one that someone pointed out a minute ago. Yeah, it's just going to be, the individuality of each different plant, which I think is really speaks to the uniqueness of the agave, and why we can create something like Ocho that highlights the terroir. So I think, like you said, it's all the elements that we consider part of terroir, and just the individuality of these different plants, in spite of them being monocultures, if that makes sense. So that's one of the fields, just an example that we saw there. Now we'll jump back in time. Gosh, how many years? 60, no, 50. Yeah, no, 60 years almost. So this is my father being a cool dude in East LA in the early 60s. He, around the time this photo was taken, he was becoming a high school English teacher, where he grew up there near LA, in LA. And from an early age, he really kind of fell in love with all things Mexico. Most of his friends were Mexican or Mexican American, where he grew up. So growing up around the language, the culture, the food, getting a bit older as a teenager, being introduced to tequila and mezcal, it just became a real love for him, both of those spirits, but probably a bit more tequila. I think that was his kind of, it became one of his passions in life. And some years later, oh, there's a photo missing, I think, from this. But anyway, in about 1970, my dad visited Amsterdam, Holland, for the first time, and just decided he loved what was going on in that city, and that he would combine two of his passions and open up the first Mexican restaurant tequila bar in Holland, one of the first in Europe at the time. And about 5 years later, 5 or 6 years later, he had saved up about $15,000 and went back to Amsterdam, quit teaching, moved with my older brother and my dad's first wife, and opened the doors to Cafe Pacifico Amsterdam in 1976 on what was then the second worst neighborhood in the city, because it's all he could afford, the lease to this place. And very luckily for him, within about 6 weeks or 2 months, there were people queuing or lining up around the block to get in. And he had, you know, people like Queen, Freddie Mercury and Queen celebrating their platinum album in there. The Beach Boys, the Jackson brothers and sisters, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, the Pretenders, actors like Cheech Marin, Cheech and Chong used to go in regularly. This is the opening of London, opening night. Hunter S. Thompson was there having fun and creating some problems for the people interviewing him here. And then this is Paris in '84, and over the last 45 years, opening up a total of 18 different bars and restaurants, all of them tequila bars and Mexican themed, and going to, you know, these new 6 different countries, 2 continents, so mostly Europe and Australia, and introducing, in many cases, drinkers there, you know, in Holland, Germany, France, the UK, Italy. For the first time, most of these people had ever encountered tequila and margaritas, artisanal mezcal, 100% agave tequila that he would self-import. So people loved it. People had a lot of fun in these places, but my dad wanted to take it a step further, and he wanted people to really understand and appreciate what was in their glass. So he started taking groups of Mexico to Mexico first, his own team. So he would fly people from all around the world in the different sites. About once a year, they would rent kind of a big tour bus and go around and see distilleries for themselves, go into little local cantinas and bars and restaurants. So the team could see this for themselves, gain the knowledge of tequila and mezcal for themselves, but also hopefully share that passion and get kind of bitten by that bug, so to speak, more directly. That worked well for many, many years. For decades, my dad would take those trips. Eventually, he incorporated more press trips. So he'd take journalists from different parts of the world. He'd take other bartenders and bar industry professionals from other, not his own group, from different parts of the world, and really kind of wanting to promote the category as a whole. Eventually, the Mexican government took notice, especially that exports from Mexico to Europe, especially, had grown a lot in kind of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they started asking the producers, what happened here? Why did kind of tequila take off in sales for you guys? And the producers all knew my dad because he was there, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year with different groups. They said, look, anything about tequila in Europe, you have to talk to this crazy gringo Tomas Estes, who that's what he does. He just works with tequila in Europe. So they found out what he had been doing and doing all of these. By then he was doing tastings and master classes, and wrote a book eventually down the line. But they wanted to kind of recognize him or honor him somehow for this work he had done around the tequila category. So they named him, the CNIT named him as the official tequila ambassador from Mexico to the European Union. So that was a title that he was extremely, extremely, extremely proud to have received and to have kept up until his passing. And that was around the time when he got that recognition that he met and became very good friends with Carlos Camarena, who's here on the right. And again, I suspect that Carlos Camarena is a name that most of you will be familiar with. Carlos is a 5th generation tequilero and master distiller, 3 generations at this distillery that this photo was taken at, called Latilla. His daughters, who are now all involved with Tequila Ocho, especially in Mexico, are 6th generation, obviously. So that's really exciting to have them carrying on the family values and philosophy of producing what I think is the best quality possible tequila in the world. So they became good friends. Carlos's family flagship brand is called Tapatio, which has been in production since the late 30s or early 40s at La Alteña, as well as El Tesoro de Don Felipe, which is now owned by Beam Suntory, but that was created by Carlos and his father in the late 80s. So really kind of iconic brands. Tapatio is my dad's favorite tequila, always was really. And one day, years after they first became friends, Carlos said to my dad, he said, Tomas, I've been thinking I would really love to create a brand of tequila with you. And my dad was shocked because he had been working with tequila, with other brands of tequila for decades at that point, but had never really considered starting his own brand. But he didn't have to think twice. He just said, absolutely, yes, Carlos, let's do it. And the two of them didn't go out and do a bunch of market research and find out what, quote unquote, consumers wanted to drink. They created a tequila that they enjoyed drinking. And for my father, what he enjoyed drinking most was this first point here, was a tequila that tasted as much like agave as possible. So the number one goal from Tequila Ocho, from the first development, which was probably 17 years ago, that they first really started playing around with the brand, the liquid that would become Tequila Ocho. The goal was to create a tequila with as much agave flavor as possible. The single field concept we already mentioned. My dad was a real wine lover. In the mid 80s, he kind of got introduced to Burgundy wines, especially, and started going every year. For about 30 years, he went to the en primeur tastings in Burgundy, so to taste the new vintages before they were released. And he became really interested, I would say fascinated almost to the point of obsession with this concept of terroir that's found in any wine region, but especially I would almost call it micro terroir in Burgundy, where you can really walk, you know, a few feet, a few yards, and you can see the soil composition change, you can smell it change, you can taste the difference in soil. So he always wondered what effect or what impact, if any, this same concept of single vineyard, or parcellaire, as we would call it in French, would have, or clos, would have on agave and tequila. So he said to Carlos, could we create the first single field tequila in these early days? And Carlos said, well, logistically, yes, because at that time his family had about 47 or 48 different fields. Now they've got many, many more that they've acquired since then. But Carlos said, yes, like physically, logistically, this is possible. We have enough different fields to do this. But he said, Tomas, be careful. My dad says, what do you mean be careful? I'm not used to being careful. Carlos said, if we do this, every batch that we produce from these different single fields will taste a bit different. And my dad said, if that's what ends up happening, that's exactly what we want, because it proves or it demonstrates that terroir does exist in tequila production. So Carlos, before taking over from his dad as master distiller for the distillery, he worked in the field. So he would run all these different fields for the family. And he just inherently understood that because of these different elements of terroir, of soil composition, of orientation towards the sun, of altitude, drainage, all of these things, that the tequila produced from these different fields would taste different. And of course, 26 fields later, or 27, I think now, 27 fields later, we can indeed say that they are like siblings in the family. They share the same DNA. They are very much unmistakably Tequila Ocho, and yet the unique kind of characteristics, like siblings will have their own unique characteristics in the family. They have their own unique flavor profiles. So it's been a very, very interesting experiment, let's say. And the second one that I include here, which is 100% added free and a focus on sustainability, this is really something that Carlos and his family have always been doing. And it just happened to kind of fall into the same philosophy or ethos that my father had with his prior businesses. So this was really kind of, I would say, the three main points of what Tequila Ocho was all about and still is all about. So it took about 2.5 years to develop the liquid and the production process. The name Ocho is actually, the full name is Muestra Número Ocho, sample number 8. So after those 2.5 years, 2.5 years, Carlos and my dad tasted all of these different samples, what they call samples, what I almost call recipes. So Carlos had played around with different ages of the agave, different ways of cooking, different ways of milling, different ways of fermenting, different ways of distilling, and created all these different samples as a result. And Carlos and my father both chose in blind independent tastings Muestra Número Ocho, sample number 8, as being the expression that had the most agave flavor in it. And then the name just kind of stuck. Obviously, we don't call it Muestra Número Ocho, that's a mouthful. We just shortened it to Tequila Ocho. I like this photo from this is the patio with the agaves just getting unloaded from the truck, straight from the field. And this is what I was talking about, some of these brown spots, right? It almost looks like dirt, but in this case, it's not actually dirt or earth or soil. This is what we call pinto or pintada, these kind of brown spots or concentrations of sugar on the outside of the plant. So we really look for quite an advanced level of maturity. Other producers actually prefer the plants to be mostly green. And some, I won't name specific names, but you all know the brand, very, very, very big brand of tequila, actually fairly well produced, although the way they produce it results in quite a neutral flavor profile. But they are very, very strict, let's say, about the agaves, the piñas they receive at their patio. And if they have more than 10%, at least this is what they told me when I was there a couple of years ago, if they have more than 10% of the outside of the plant brown or red like that, they won't accept the agaves. So
Really?
it's kind of like bananas, right? Some people have a personal preference and they like their bananas slightly green. I'm not sure who those people are, but I think there are people out there who eat their bananas that way. Some people want their bananas perfectly yellow, no green and no brown on it. And some people like those brown spots, right? They like when the banana is a bit more mature, and that's very much kind of our approach. This is what we found had the most complexity and the most kind of rich cooked agave notes by having these advanced levels of maturity.
So it took all those different methods. What were the variants? I mean, obviously, probably just different. What do you call it? Fermentation methods, and you said distillation, probably using stainless steel or other instead of copper. And you said different roller or milling extraction methods. But what happened to the other ones? Did they just not like them enough to make it a different brand itself, or they just wanted to create this one special brand?
That's exactly it, Ernesto. I mean, this was, you know, obviously it didn't have a name yet, but this was just the number one goal. And the single field thing is really, I think, the thing that makes Ocho the most unique compared to any other brand. But that's not the number one goal. The number one goal for Tequila Ocho is and always has been to produce the tequila that, to Carlos and my father, had the most agave flavor possible. That's really what they set out to do. So that's where that kind of eighth sample or eighth recipe comes into play, that one, they found that it had the most agave flavor possible.
And the restaurant that he opened, what were some, if you can tell us, if he ever told you, what were some of the brands that he carried at his restaurants?
Well, in the early days, there were really only two brands imported into Europe. You know, in the 70s and 80s, there was Cuervo and Sauza. So eventually he was able to, there really wasn't much back in those days, but he was able to self-import 100% agave tequilas that he would just mainly import for his own venues. He didn't become a wholesaler or anything, really, although I think he sold to, you know, friends and things like that. But, you know, he'd bring in things like Herradura, and eventually, you know, brands like Chinaco that kind of hit the market in the mid to late 80s. You know, that was a pretty big turning point in the evolution of tequila, I'd say, globally. You know, brands like Chinaco coming out. But yeah, when he arrived in Europe, there really was no tequila culture much to speak of. There was a bit of that kind of slammer culture, you know, and it didn't have, to the people that did know about it, it didn't have the best reputation, because also in those days, you know, and until recently, and in some places this is still the case, there were some fake tequilas on the market. You know, people would just produce something locally, you know, probably not very well produced spirit, nothing to do with the agave, give it some flavoring and put tequila on the label. Of course, that's pretty well policed now, as you guys know, but the CRT is doing I think, quite a good job with that. And we don't see that as much. I think that was really harmful to the category over the years. But yeah, for him, it was really just Cuervo and Sauza. And in the 70s, he would make what he called curados. So very much borrowing the term from pulque, like the flavored pulques. He would make his own flavored tequilas just to give his guests something a bit more interesting. So he would use, you know, fresh natural ingredients. He'd put coffee beans and just infuse them, just do a cold maceration or a cold infusion in the bottles, or vanilla pods, or cinnamon sticks, you know, lemon zest. I think he did some chili ones that people really like. So for him, it was just finding a way to engage with his guests more and kind of provide something interesting for them.
That's awesome. Do you plan on doing like mini projects of curados besides the ones that are currently out?
So we actually did a spin-off brand that Carlos also produces called Curado. And that was a whole other crazy project that instead of infusing, because remember their goal, this is, you know, this, you said this is where things get a little bit crazy, because my dad, Carlos, myself have all of these ideas. Very few of them actually make it, you know, outside of the distillery, let's say. A lot of them just stay as experiments, but Curado is one of the ones that made it to market. And Carlos and my dad were thinking, the goal was to create a tequila that had as much agave flavor as possible. To them, they achieved that with Tequila Ocho, but they had this crazy idea to infuse the tequila they produced with pieces of cooked agave. So taking Blanco tequila, putting it in just an inert vessel, in this case, stainless steel, and putting in pieces of cooked agave and letting it macerate, letting it infuse, and it takes on even more of that cooked agave flavor and aroma. It takes on the color from the cooked agave, so it creates this really beautiful golden color. And it takes on a little bit of the sweetness of the cooked agave. So it's just a really wild product. They would joke that it was 110% agave because they were taking 100% agave tequila and adding more agave to it. So for years we just produced that and didn't really commercialize it. We just, you know, kind of had it for ourselves. And eventually we relaunched the brand and included a range extension or a line extension that included other varieties of cooked agave infused in the tequila. So we do an espadín from Oaxaca, we do a cupreata from Michoacán, and we're experimenting for next year with a few different agave varieties. It's a totally crazy project that you know, I don't really have time for myself. I focus on Ocho mainly, but it's, if you guys get the chance, we're just launching in the US. We're launching in California soon, hopefully next year. We've just recently launched in Colorado, Texas, and I think Florida is also just starting. So yeah, that's an exciting project.
So, but it wasn't available in the States before, right? You're starting to do the launch now?
Just really in the last 6 months in those select states, yeah.
Gotcha. You got to bring it to Chicago.
I know, man. I know. Illinois is an important market for, well, for all spirits, but for tequila certainly as well.
I promise I'm not hogging it all.
It's all you, Ernesto. That's all the tequila, all those big tequila sales. So you guys have probably all seen the harvest at some point. Oh, I usually have a video. I'm not sure. I'm missing a couple of slides here. But basically, I think everyone knows the leaves are sheared off by this razor sharp tool called a coa that Don Memo has here, one of the jimadores for Tequila Ocho. Shear off the leaves, uproot the plant, and what we're left with is what, again, you guys will all know as the piña, right? Because it kind of resembles a pineapple, so piña, pineapple. And this is the part that's used for tequila production. The leaves have no sugar content. That outside kind of green waxy covering of the pencas of the leaves will add kind of a bitterness to the final product, the final tequila produced. So you really want kind of to shave those off and not much of that green waxy covering to be left on the plant. So for Ocho's cooking, we cook for a total of 72 hours in the oven. So 3 days, no hotter than 85 degrees Celsius using steam. Again, this is pretty much a typical horno de mampostería, traditional stone brick oven. And at the end of those 72 hours, you can see these agaves are beautifully cooked and full of sweet juice. So we now need to extract that juice, and that's done through the milling process. Ocho is 100% roller mill. We don't use the Tahona. A lot of people ask me why, especially because the Tahona is so kind of traditional in many ways and rustic. El Tesoro is 100% Tahona. Tapatio is partially Tahona now. They've updated the recipe more recently. But this, to Carlos and my dad, had the most complexity. It really brought out a lot of nice vegetal notes, whereas 100% Tahona tequila, to me, you get these really nice vanilla caramel notes, even on the Blanco in 100% Tahona tequila, but it's very clean. It's very clean. And this, they found, actually had more complexity and more of those vegetal notes. So we use 100% malt roller mill. The water source, you can see there's water being added in these different passes, these different steps. The water source is super important for us. It's obviously the same for Ocho, Tapatio, and Tesoro. Currado and Villalobos are also, those are the 5 brands produced at Latilla. The water is full of minerals. It's from a spring just there on the distillery property. It's called El Nacimiento, the birthplace, as in the birthplace of water. And we leave those minerals in. We don't demineralize the water because it's going to add, when you guys taste the plata, if you already are, even better, there's a really crisp minerality on that plata that I just think is delicious. And a lot of that profile will come from the water being used. Yeah, I can see some bottles there on screen. The minerality stays in the Reposado and Anejo, but it changes slightly with the influence and the accents from the oak. In the Anejo, when we get around to that one, that minerality is there, but it turns into this kind of salted chocolate, salted caramel with the wood that I think is really, really pleasant, really enjoyable. So we collect the aguamiel here, the sweet juice down at the bottom, and then we take them over to our fermentation tanks, Ocho. And again, the difference with the other brands here is that some, like El Tesoro, for example, uses some of the fibers in the fermentation. We do no fibers in our fermentation. But all 3 brands all use these wooden fermenters, right? Which is fairly unusual, as you guys know. There's, I think, 4 distilleries that I'm aware of, tequila distilleries, Patron, Fortaleza, Siete Leguas, Ocho, Cascawin maybe as well, so maybe 5. I'm not sure about Cascawin because I haven't been recently. And I know that Vivanco had some that were wood and some that were stainless, and some that were actually a hybrid of stainless and wood, which I thought was pretty interesting. But distilleries that only use wood, 100% wood, I think there's only 4 or 5 distilleries that I know of. So it's quite unusual. The wood, this is pine wood. These are about 3,000 liter vats. And the wood, of course, being porous, will have yeasts and microorganisms living within those pores, and that's going to help us along with fermentation. It's a totally open fermentation. It's a wild fermentation, so natural airborne yeast comes from outside. You can see all the windows are open and mixes with the must. Because of that, it's quite a long fermentation. It's usually between 4 and 5 days. And at the end of that time, we have a mosto muerto, that's about 5% ABV. And of course, then we need to distill it. And we distill pretty much all of our tequila to about 55%, give or take, maybe 1%. So obviously, everything we're tasting today, I think Ernesto included some limited editions, but everything in the core range for Tequila Ocho is then brought down to 40% ABV or 80 proof, using the same water, but demineralized this time, right? We don't want to add very heavily mineral water at this step because it'll overpower the tequila. And then, of course, for aging, we use first fill American whiskey barrels. So actually, you can see some of the stamps on here from different distilleries. We get barrels from big distilleries, you know, some of the big names, and tiny distilleries that I've never heard of. To us, especially at Ocho, doesn't really matter what the first fill was, because we're going to fill those barrels at least a few times with our sister brands Tapatio and El Tesoro before Ocho goes in. Why do we do that? Because, well, a few reasons. We want to minimize the influence of the wood on the tequila. If you guys remember, that #1 goal that Carlos and my father had was to create a tequila, or in this case, tequilas, with as much agave flavor as possible. And what they were very wary of or cautious about is not over oaking their tequilas. So they really want a minimal influence of the wood on their tequilas. And also because even if you get an empty barrel from an American whiskey distillery, there is still, even though the barrel looks empty, there's still like, 4 or 5 liters, so like a gallon of American whiskey usually left inside of those staves. So by filling them with our sister brands a few times, it removes any of that American whiskey from the barrel. That's not the flavor profile we want. I love bourbon personally. I love actually all whiskey. But, if I want to drink bourbon, I drink bourbon or rye or whatever. If I want to drink tequila, I want it to taste like agave rather than whiskey. Everything hand bottled, hand labeled, hand inspected. And there we have the finished product, Tequila Ocho Plata. And if you guys don't have some poured in your glass already, if you have ideally a tasting glass kind of like this, yeah, beautiful glass there. Even on this photo, but obviously in person, it'll be even clearer. You can see the viscosity. You can see those legs, those tears on the side of the glass. The tequila is really clinging to the glass. One of the reasons for that is that Ocho is never chill filtered or charcoal filtered. We do use one type of filtration, which is just because we use copper pot stills. Copper does wear down over time, unfortunately, much, much quicker than stainless steel does. That's one of the reasons copper is maybe not used as often as stainless, especially in the bigger distilleries. So we really don't want even a small piece of copper ending up in our tequila. So we use a particle filtration, so it removes physical particles, but it doesn't remove those nice essential oils like chill filtration does, right? So we keep in those nice oils. And of course, along with those oils, we're keeping in aromas, we're keeping in flavors, and probably most of all, texture, right? So for me, all of the Tequila Ocho range, and if you're tasting the Plata now, there's this really nice, rich mouth coat, filling, coating texture to it. And as we get into the Reposado and Añejos and more of the age range, it turns into this kind of buttery, creamy mouthfeel that is really, I think, really pleasant. So, Ernesto, remind me what we have here to taste today.
We have the 2021 Ladera Blanco or Plata. We have 2021 Ladera Reposado, the 2020 Cerro Grande Añejo, and then we also have the single barrel Las Presas 2018 high proof, 52.5% alcohol, so 50.
Wow.
We
Beautiful.
have Continental aged in cognac casks. We have the Tropical aged in rum casks. And we have La Latilla 2015 Extra Añejo.
Ernesto, thank you so much for sharing these gems. I mean, this is really, really special, man.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I got a couple other ones that I want to show off. That's, I don't know if he's here. Jeff Hernandez hooked me up with some of the single barrels from Redstone and Depot Liquors and Wine Traders. So I've been getting on the bandwagon of single barrel picks from Ocho, and I'm trying to get as many as I can.
That's so cool, man. Yeah, Jeff has, well, you do too behind you, but Jeff has this crazy selection right now of I think he's trying to collect every release we've ever done, which is super cool. So I'm gonna mule some bottles over from Europe at some point to him.
Nice. So 2021 La Ladera. What can you tell us about this one?
So La Ladera obviously was harvested this year. What is it? Yeah, December. It's not 2022 yet. Just checking myself there. So this one was kind of between 2,100 and 2,150 meters above sea level. So, and I'm not making this up, the average slope for that field is 8%. It's about an 86 acre, area, the field itself. And the average sugar content, so we usually almost always record the average sugar content for the harvest in each field, was just over 30%, which is high, even for Los Altos, which is, you know, higher than on average than the Tequila Valley. It might be 25 to 26% average in Los Altos, and so 30% is pretty high. On the Plata, if you guys all have that, to me, there's this really nice kind of roasted pineapple nose, aniseed, which I often get in our different expressions, and again, citric notes, which tend to be either lime zest or pink grapefruit zest. In this case, I get that nice pink grapefruit note, and apple, this kind of fresh green note. I very often get spearmint and eucalyptus, so these really nice green notes on the nose of the Plata. And even on this one, like hints of vanilla and cinnamon, like we mentioned before, that do sometimes come just in the Blanco or the Plata from the agave itself. And then really nice, again, that minerality that I had mentioned, really nice minerality and this earthiness on the palate. Kind of white peppercorn or even pink peppercorn on the palate. What do you guys find?
I just want to let, we got a couple people that we're trying to convert from the whiskey world to tequila, and the Plata is going to be the blue label. The Reposado is going to be the orange label, and the Anejo is going to be the red label. But I mean,
and again, Ernesto, thank you for printing those labels. They look great.
Oh, I had help from my friend Anthony Giuluzzi. He's the one that did the hookup on the labels. I was surprised.
It looks great, man. It looks really good. Yeah.
But no, I actually get a little bit of brininess, and I do see get the minerality. And it is, like you said, very crisp, very clean. I do get the pepper in there, but I don't get the pineapple. Maybe I'm getting more of the agave, which is what your father and Carlos intended. We want to get the most agave as possible.
That's exactly it. That's always the goal. And the beauty is that it is always agave, but it expresses itself differently based on all those factors that we mentioned: the weather, the soil composition, the altitude. And to us, that's really the beauty of showcasing not only the agave, but the surroundings of where those specific agaves were grown. I think that's what makes, one of the things that makes Tequila Ocho really interesting.
And before I started to know more about tequila, I always thought, like, hey man, everything's made out of the same plant. Why is it going to taste differently? And I'm not really much a fan of a Blanco, but as I started to get more and more into the tequila world, I started to differentiate, you know, every single one has its nuances. Like I'm going to say, Lalo doesn't like to have a lot of influence. That's why they're focusing on the Blanco. But you take that Blanco and this Blanco, and it's totally different profiles, which, like you said, is the terroir and the production methods and everything that cause those variances. Even though it might be the same tequila, I mean, the same agave plant, it's still everything else that makes everything different. And I'm trying to get into certifications and everything. And I know that at level 3, level 4, and level 5 for WSET, Kobe was telling me that you get into the chemistry, all the effects on the wood, the atmosphere, the altitude, the height, you know, everything. And you start getting into the chemical composition of everything. So, I mean.
Yeah, right.
Everybody thinks tequila is just an easy spirit to make, but no, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of things that take it, you know, to create these kind of things. but I love
I
it.
think that's a really good point. And you look at around the world, these other agave spirits from South Africa and India and Australia, the Antipodes. You know, I think people try to replicate it and just really have not had much success so far, because it is really it's such a unique spirit, and it is not easy to produce. I mean, you know, all these great producers make it look easy, but it is not easy to produce a great tequila.
We also got to
or
take
agave
into
spirit.
consideration too. They've been doing this for how many years? And then if everybody that is starting to do it, they're just going to start from scratch, getting their tweaks and modifications to get it to become that creative spirit like they do in Mexico. But it'll take a while, I think. So what are everybody's thoughts about the Blanco? Did everybody start to try it? You can unmute yourselves to talk.
I like it. It's very nice. Very nice.
We love it.
Yeah, I was getting almond as well, and
I didn't get almond.
it's a nice floral.
It's delicious.
Note. It really is. It does shine with agave forward first, right out of the bottle, you know, and then everything just gets complex from there. And it holds that complexity. You keep catching new stuff as you get another sip and on the palate and the finish.
He's always been an Ocho lover since we started drinking tequila back in like 2007. And I didn't used to like Ocho, but I liked the sweet tequilas. And so fast forward so many years, the sweet tequilas are what got me into tasting tequila. And now I can't even drink them. And I love this. My palate has just changed over the years.
Yeah.
Salute to you. And this
That's
has been
great,
a great
yeah.
presentation, Jesse. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. And yeah, like you said, you're not poo-pooing them, and there's no, you know, we like to think there's something for everyone in the tequila category. It doesn't mean that Ocho is going to be for everyone. We're explaining to you guys why we've produced it the way we have, and why we enjoy that flavor profile. And I'm very glad that you do too.
Yeah. Did you talk about the bat harvests?
I did not talk about the bat friendly project. I can do that for sure. So you guys have the plata. Why don't you guys pour yourself at your leisure, pour yourself some reposado as I look for some photos about the bat friendly.
That would be cool.
Where is that?
You don't mind? You sure you don't mind?
No, guys, I already told you, this is 100% for you guys, your guys' time. So I really appreciate and encourage you to ask questions about bat friendly or anything else that you guys are interested in. And hopefully I can answer those questions. Here we go.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the agave flavors in this. I mean, definitely very present agave, and then the cleanliness and the crisp of this Blanco. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Hugo. Thank you. Salud. Unfortunately, I don't have any tequila where I am at the moment. Brazil is one of the few countries that we don't have Ocho in, so I'm dry currently. But
You didn't
crack the bottle?
I'm living vicariously through you guys.
You got to start what your dad did in Europe. Bring it to Brazil, man.
I know. That's the plan. That's the plan for sure.
Brazil's a tough country to import stuff into.
Yeah, but Latin America is a funny one for outside of Mexico, obviously, for tequila. You know, I think people just assume that in Latin America people drink tequila. People do, but it's not a big market, and it tends to be the kind of large, well-known, you know, mass-produced brands that are available here. And there's not a whole lot of interest yet. I think this will change in really kind of more interesting or premium tequilas, but I think that'll change.
Do you live in Brazil, Jesse?
No. I'm just here for my friend's wedding, so I just flew in today. Unfortunately, with Ernesto, there were some delays in getting him the bottles and things like that. Some of the bottles that we're tasting, so we had to reschedule the time a few different a few different times. So I was not planning to be in Brazil during our tasting.
Well, thanks for doing it.
Yeah.
Salud.
No, thank you guys for being here. It's my absolute pleasure to share this time with you guys and to see so many familiar faces as well. I saw Mitchell's here as well. As I said, Chris Porter, and I just I can't see all you guys at once, but I'm definitely enjoying seeing familiar faces today. Sharon. So we talk a little bit about propagation in general before. These are not blue agaves, as you can tell. It's just a photo that I quite like of these quiotes. So there's a few different methods of propagation for these agaves, and I'll try and go through them quickly here. Actually, I'll do this one first. Where is it?
I don't always want to mute. Hold on.
So this is the method that has been used for over 100 years, basically every single time for propagating the blue agave. So there's these kind of, it's not the best photo, but there's these rhizomatic offshoots here of the parent plant that are known as hijuelos or hijuelitos, little pups. And these are clonal offshoots from the parent plant. So these are genetic copies of that original plant, this one. And these will get, at a certain age, will get plucked, pulled out of the ground, and usually left to stress for some months before being planted. And, you know, typically this is the setup, about 2 meters, give or take, between rows, and about 1 meter. Whoops, sorry, what just happened? Can you guys still see the screen?
Yeah.
What did I do?
Oh, you went to
Yeah, we can still see it. It looks like you're in presenter mode right now.
presenter.
Yeah, let me see how to get out of this.
Try clicking the use slideshow.
Ah, there we go. Oh, good. Thank you. Sorry, I had never done that before, so I didn't know how to get out of there. So yeah, it's usually about 2 meters, you know, industry standard between rows, and about 1 meter between plants within the row. And this is a setup that, you know, has been commonplace in the tequila world for, you know, probably over 100 years. So this is the type of propagation that has resulted in the blue agave being classed as a monoculture. Now, going back to the quiote, if we let this big stalk grow, because the reason it's not being let to grow very often is because you can see this, all of the energy, and specifically, importantly, all of the sugar from the piña will go into growing this stalk. Now, it can grow up to kind of 30 feet within a matter of 2 weeks. So it's really like giving all of its energy to growing this quiote, and the plant typically will die shortly afterwards. But in any case, that piña can no longer be used for tequila production once that quiote grows. So agave growers will go through their fields and very diligently cut the quiotes as soon as they start growing, castrate them, in fact, they call it, because this is one of the 2 methods of reproduction within these fluorescents here, these flowers, is sexual reproduction, right? There's flowers here. Bats will come because this is the reason for the name Bat Friendly Project. The agaves photosynthesize at night, which is fairly unique in the plant world. This is something that these plants have developed over an estimated 11.8 or 12 million years of their existence to be able to survive in these very inhospitable, in many cases, very arid and dry conditions. So if they were to photosynthesize during the day and open up those pores, they would lose the very little water they have stored to evaporation. Whereas doing it at night, the sun's gone, it's much cooler, and they can retain much more of that water. So it's the same thing with these flowers here at the top of the quiote. Those open up at nighttime, and of course the bats provide the bats with food, and bats travel kind of up to 200 kilometers in one night feeding. So the hope is that they will go across large areas of land and cross-pollinate these agaves. And of course, there are other agave varieties that are very closely related to the blue agave. And so mixing with those as well.
About that.
So we will hopefully see over long periods of time, this is a project that we estimate will take several decades really to show the full results of what we're hoping to find, to reintroduce genetic diversity in a very natural way into the blue agave variety. Now, why are we doing this? Because there is kind of some potential concern in the industry around something like a phylloxera, a disease or a pest of some kind coming through. And remember, if all these plants are considered genetically identical, essentially, they should be resistant or resilient to all of the same diseases or pests, but they could also be susceptible to the same diseases and pests. So it's a potential concern that we are aware of and we are acting on in what we call the bat-friendly project. So on the tequila producer side, we have other producers like, I think the Rosales family of Cascawin are still involved, to my knowledge, and the Gonzalez family of Siete Leguas, I think, are also involved, and of course, Carlos and his family. David Suro and Tequila Interchange Project really spearheaded this on their side as well. And then on the bat side is a gentleman named Dr. Rodrigo Medellin, who is in the UK, he's nicknamed the Batman of Mexico. He often appears on BBC and different programs there. So he's a kind of a leading bat expert in the world. And to my knowledge, he's already delisted one of the lesser long-nose bats from the endangered species list through his work. So it's really, really exciting to be working, on our side with the agave, and also seeing what the guys are doing with the bats on the other side. So obviously for the last couple of years, I've had to be careful talking to people about bats, but I think it's all right to mention bats again.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a quick question. I was at an agave festival in Seattle a few years ago. Had an opportunity to speak to some of the Ocho folks, and they did have a sample of a bat-friendly release. Now, what goes into that? Is it a specific harvest that they say, okay, we're going to use this field and give it to the bats, and then the next year or the next time that we harvest from it will produce? Or, I mean, what goes into getting that bat sticker on an Ocho bottle is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, Ocho or any other brand that participates in the program is about leaving, well, it used to be 5%. We're experiencing a fairly severe shortage right now of blue agave in the tequila industry. Ocho, not so much because we have our own fields, but as a whole, the industry is kind of, as you probably all know, in a, I wouldn't call it so much of a crisis, but almost to that point of really a fairly severe shortage. So in order to mitigate that shortage, it's gone down from 5% to 2 or 3% currently. Producers are leaving those amounts of quiotes to grow, because that's really key for this sexual reproduction to take place, is to have enough quiotes that are left to sprout, which of course, with the price of agave where it is, many growers would not want to do that for obvious reasons. So how are you? Is everyone tasting the Reposado now?
More agave.
Yes, very good.
Taste more agave in it.
More agave in the reposado. That's really interesting.
I don't know. I think it tastes sweeter, but I love it. I love it.
Yeah, to me, it's age. The interesting thing with the Reposados, this is maybe like the third year that I had, and I like them all, but it's interesting. Kind of goes back to the beginning of the story of how it's different every year. Like all three of the Reposados, yeah, it tastes like Ocho, but like 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember what year, it seemed much more peppery than this one does, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little buttery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well, I have to say, I'm a very big fan of this estate, the one we're sipping on now, and it reminds me a lot of the La Loma estate for the Plata or the Blanco. When I get into the Reposados with Ocho, it's very hard to pick up on any kind of wood, of course, because the barrel's so used. But you get just a little bit of a change. You get a little more of that buttery starting to happen, and yeah. But a very big fan of this single estate, this one. So
Yeah.
I used to spread misinformation about Ocho, saying that they only use barrels that have been used 8 times from previous distillers.
Somebody told you that. Who told you that?
I don't know, but I believed it, and it makes sense, but I don't think that's true. Tell me I'm wrong, and I'll be okay with it.
No, John, I've seen information like that disseminated by people who have worked with the brand or around the brand. So I think people just get excited about the number 8 and kind of run with it and just think that anything to do with the brand is gonna be the number 8.
Yeah, and also because I mean, you look at a typical Ocho Reposado, and it compares to a lot of Blancos. I mean, or a lot of the Ocho Añejos compared to so many Reposados as far as their color profile, because it's just so light, and I really like that. I do a lot. I'm a big fan of it's just very just
So this leads me to a question, Jesse. Sorry to cut you off there. So Ocho does not ship and rechar barrels at all, do they?
No, never. So obviously they're going to have that first char from the American whiskey fill, but we obviously steam the barrels when we get them, we clean them out, but we never rechar, again, because that would just give us more wood influence, which is not something we're looking for.
exactly.
So it's interesting what you said, Christine, because when Carlos, my dad, the first ever batch of Tequila Ocho was 2007 La Ribera, that was only a Blanco. They didn't age the original batch at all, because to them, the kind of quote unquote purest expression of agave was always going to be a Blanco. Down the line, they said, well, what if we did play around with aging and finding ways to still accentuate that agave note, that agave flavor profile using barrels? And so I was really pleased to hear you say actually that to you, there's even a bit more of that agave flavor. And I think the wood, if used correctly, can bring out that kind of sweet cooked agave note. And to Mitch's point about Mitchell's point about the kind of creaminess, even though we don't rechar these barrels, and there's not going to be a huge amount of I want to be careful about using the word additive, because I'm not using it in the term of adding glycerin or sugar or something. But what I mean is the additive effects of oak or wood aging, which of course the wood imparts its own flavor and aroma and color, and has an influence in texture. It imparts those things, but there's also other things happening in barrel. There's subtractive things happening as well, which of course is where, as an example, where char comes in. Char is basically charcoal, right? It acts as a natural filter, and it removes certain impurities from spirits in the barrel. Now, barrels are also airtight, right? Sorry, they're watertight. They will not leak. A well-made barrel will not leak, so it's watertight. But barrels are not airtight, so there is oxygenation taking place, and oxygenation to me helps create a really nice texture that often I experience as buttery or creamy. So there's other things happening in the barrel besides just giving it that kind of oak flavor.
That leads me to another question, Jesse. I learned a lot about with Fortaleza through Chris Maxwell and you know how they used to age in the caves and everything. I'm curious, does Ocho do a similar thing? Do they do a barrel rotation from fluctuating temperatures and you know, do you have varying barrel houses that might influence the barrels differently?
Really, really good question. So we have one part of the aging cellar, we could almost call it, for Tequila Ocho, with Latilla, sorry, for Tequila Ocho. And we tend to move some barrels around, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's very well coordinated, especially like you find in American whiskey, right, with the rick houses, where it's a really important part of the production. Because we're below ground, so we're not in a cave per se, like Fortaleza, like you said, but we are below ground. We don't temperature control the room, we don't humidity control the room, but it does stay a bit cooler because being slightly below ground. But no, you know, there's not, for us, we kind of leave it. For the Reposado that you're tasting now is just over 60 days. It's actually 64 days. That's just us having a little bit of fun because 64 happens to be 8 weeks and 8 days, and 8 squared. That's another fun one for you, John. But really, we're going for minimal aging on all the core line, right? So when we get into the barrel select range, which Ernesto is very, very, very kindly and generously shared with us, those are different proofs. But oh, sorry, those are different ages, right? So we'll talk a bit more about that. But everything in the core range is minimal aged. So the Añejo is a year exactly. Extra Añejo is 3 years exactly. So we're not playing with the aging, I would say, as much as many other brands. Perhaps in some ways because it's not a kind of core part of our philosophy, let's say.
Hey, Jesse, to that point, as far as not recharring barrels and typically having kind of a lighter color profile, I know that Felipe Camarena is very similar in that style as well. And I'm just wondering if both Carlos and Felipe, as they grew up, they learned that from their father, because I know both brands, you know, product from El Pandillo and also the Ocho products just tend to be a little bit lighter as far as the color goes. I'm just wondering, it's probably something they learned from their father, right?
I would say so. You know, again, you know, the philosophy with Latilla, with Carlos, Felipe, their grandfather, really, I would say has always been to produce a very traditional, low intervention, if we can use that term, from wine tequilas. So I think it certainly is in their DNA, so to speak. And what you're saying now about the light colors in our aged expressions, and what John said earlier about, you know, the Reposado sometimes almost being more like a Plata and the Añejo sometimes being more like a Reposado. I remember someone years ago saying the same thing, something very similar to me. They said, Tequila Ocho Añejo is the best Reposado tequila in the world. So I thought that was pretty funny. But, you know, that again, it's different. What we're doing is different. What Felipe is doing is different. But this is the beauty of the tequila category. I really do think there's something for everyone. If someone is a bourbon drinker, someone mentioned, I think it was Ernesto, that you know, you've spoken to a lot of people who were big bourbon drinkers and kind of moved them over to tequila. Absolutely. You know, something like Herradura Añejo, which is 2 years aged and, you know, I think medium to heavy char and newer American white oak barrels. And to me, it really tastes like bourbon. And again, I love bourbon. And I actually really enjoy Herradura Añejo, but that's not the flavor profile we're looking for at all. We're looking for kind of the opposite of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of good, I call them gateway tequilas for bourbon drinkers, where it's like, you know, I kind of favor like a Don Pilar Extra Añejo, where it has it has the agave profile, but it also has kind of a bourbon note to it too. And I give that to people and they're like, wow, I didn't think I really liked tequila before. And I call that a gateway tequila, where I kind of bring them over to the dark side.
And like
Hey,
Christine
JC,
said,
I
starting
got two
with
questions for you.
This was
Wait,
our
wait,
gateway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hey,
Sorry.
just want to say first, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for your time, and thank you to Ernesto Cruz as well. Thank you for putting this on, and it's really something special when you're able to connect with the brands that you're drinking. So appreciate it. First question: do you guys set the number that you produce for each vintage, or is each vintage a different bottle amount? And then do you guys keep track of like feedback that you receive from the bottles that people love? I personally love La Loma, and I've heard a lot of people love it too. Do you guys like in the background keep tabs on who really loves each vintage? Or
John, first of all, it's you said it's a pleasure to get to do these. It's a real pleasure for me as well to get to spend time with you guys, because I feel like I know, well, obviously we haven't met in person, but I feel like I know you guys from all the groups online. So it's great to spend virtual time together hanging out. So I think the first question was about quantities of the different fields, right? Quantities produced. It's really the field that dictates that. So, you know, I mentioned La Ladera was 86 acres, but some of them are much smaller. You know, we have all kinds of different sized fields. What was the one? I think the smallest field we harvested was Grande, which was, off the top of my head, was 2015 or 2016 harvest. And that was such a small field. We said, well, we're not even going to export this. This is just going to go to Mexico. And I think we shipped 50 cases to Europe just for fun. But it was just a very, very small field. So the way we select our fields is really what's ripe at the time that we need to be producing another batch. What's ripe or even overripe, like I mentioned before. So again, the fields will really dictate that. And we may only go into the fields, it may be, you know, 50 acres, but we may only harvest 60, 65% of the field. So that's going to determine the yield for us for that specific field. So it's really just whatever that field gives us. In terms of feedback, yeah, I mean, La Loma, people went crazy for, although I heard really, really good feedback about the next field, which is El Pastizal. Obviously La Ladera as well is getting really good reception. Los Mangos, which was the 2010 harvest, although I think it was released in the US under 2009 for some reason. Sometimes the years are slightly different in different parts of the world, because we do it sometimes by harvest or bottling, depending on, now we only do it by harvest, but in the past we did it sometimes different dates. So Los Mangos was one of people's, I think, all-time favorites. But what I love about Tequila Ocho is everyone says, aren't you afraid of producing a bad batch because of the way that we produce and being so, you know, reliant on the terroir of one field instead of blending across fields. And what I always say is, again, it was, you know, to, I think, Scott's point about, if you have a producer like Carlos or Felipe or, you know, anyone, Guillermo, the Rosales family, many great families producing amazing tequilas. I just think we're starting with great raw material, right? This always comes from our own fields. The agaves are always very well cared for. And the production process is tried and true and very sound and respectful of the plant and respectful of our consumers. So, you know, we haven't produced a bad batch in 26, 27 harvests now. So to me, it's just different. And someone may say, I really love the El Pastizal, that's my favorite. And someone else say, oh, no, La Loma was, I like that one more because it's more herbaceous or vegetal or earthy or whatever. So that's the beauty for me, is we all have different tastes, and different people prefer different flavor profiles.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And that's my favorite thing about Ocho, honestly, is that each bottle going into it, like, you know, you find one and it's like, okay, I'm going to go buy 3 cases of it. But each year, you know, you can expect something different and try something new. And it keeps it exciting, you know?
I think that was really a lot of the inspiration. And again, from wine, you know, if you absolutely love that vintage of that specific wine, you, like you said, you got to buy 3 cases of it, because when it's gone, it's gone. And I think that was part of the fun of creating this tequila, was that real collectability and the uniqueness of each release. So Ernesto, remind me, were there 2 Blancos, 2 Platas, by the way? Was there, I think I remember seeing La Latilla at some point. Or is that,
Latilla was just the extra añejo.
Okay, perfect. Right, okay. So what are we on to next? The añejo. Which field was that from? Cerro Grande?
The añejo was Cerro Grande, yeah. Which I already.
The añejo is Cerro Grande.
I like it.
So if you haven't already, Scott, perfect. I can see that nice label.
You can still definitely smell a lot of the agave. That's a dominant smell that I get. Then you start.
Guys, can you see what Christina's doing on her screen? She's emptied her glass into her hand.
Oh yeah.
Into her palm, and she's smelling her hand. If you have any tequila left, this is quite fun to do. I usually put it on the back side of my hand, but you can do it on your palm, whatever, or even on your arm, whatever's easiest, and just let it evaporate. Like I can see Sharon's doing that now, and give it a smell when you're done. I mean, first of all, hopefully your hand is not sticky after this, because that may be likely because of additives. So with Tequila Ocho, you should never have a sticky hand. But go ahead and smell. And what I always get is olives, is this really nice kind of brininess, this salinity, this minerality that to me expresses itself as olive brine, olive tapenade, that I find really pleasant.
Uh-oh, my hands are sticky. No, they're not.
Chris says, I'm getting an olive vibe too. Very nice. Yeah, so this sounds really strange, but this is the way that I can usually pick out Tequila Ocho blind. Obviously there's other things, but that's usually, even if there's tequilas like, you know, from the same distillery that are very close, I can usually pick up Tequila Ocho from this really unique kind of olive note. So let's see, everyone has some añejo. Sharon says definitely olive. I'm glad it's not just me. I'm not just crazy and my hands smell like olives. So the Cerro Grande field was a 2020 harvest, and that was the highest field we've harvested to date. So I think off the top of my head, it was 2,290 meters above sea level. So in feet, what is that? Maybe 7,000 feet, give or take. That's pretty high up there. You know, even for Los Altos, which is probably average 2,000, 2,100 meters, this is pretty high. It's near the municipality of Jesus Maria, which is in the eastern part of Los Altos. And yeah, for me, it's just fun tasting a field that's that high up. So again, what I tend to get in all of our añejos is that minerality from the Blanco that kind of, it doesn't go away altogether, but it kind of gets subdued in the Reposado. It really comes back to me in the añejo, and it creates this really nice, rich kind of salted caramel note with the wood. So I don't know if anyone else gets that, but I find the añejo really enjoyable.
Jesse, question for you on the añejo. Do you ever find it just tough, a challenge marketing? I mean, just we've all talked about how, you know, lighter everything is. Añejo, I've always thought is like the most reposado and like añejo I've ever had, and it's great, and that's not a bad thing. But has that ever been challenging to sell it? Because people are like, "Oh, what did you sell me reposado? I wanted something dark." Is that challenging ever?
Yes, it really has been for all of Ocho's existence, I would say, until it still is now, but it's changing in recent years. And the thing about Ocho is that this brand was not born of a commercial intention. This was something that was really just for fun with my dad and Carlos, and it grew. We never had a marketing budget until recently. I am actually still, I mean, it was me and my father. Now it's just me. as the only full-time employee of Tequila Ocho in the world, because of course Carlos and Fanny have other brands that they produce and look after. So I'm the only person globally really looking after Ocho full-time, which is pretty insane. I think we're in 51, 52 countries now. And that's really grown organically, just word of mouth, and you know, people like you guys who support our brand. We're so grateful. Not only support yourselves, but I feel like you guys are evangelists or advocates or champions for brands like Tequila Ocho. So I am very grateful to you guys for that. So it's to me, it's just been a crazy experience to be a part of, and to see this brand grow in the way it has. So to Carlos and my dad, there was never, they were in a really unique position that the market was like, no, we want, when they launched, other tequila producers laughed at them because they said people want a higher age statement, darker color, and more of that wood flavor. And they said, yeah, but we're not making this for those people. We're making this for people that love agave flavor, which 15 years ago was pretty nuts. Now, of course, a lot of people are talking in those terms, but that's relatively recent. And I think it's thanks to you guys and people like you, again, who are kind of educating people around you about what, you know, maybe steering people towards drinking more flavorful or agave flavorful tequila. So again, I obviously really appreciate that, because brands like Tequila Ocho really benefit from that.
Well, you probably know this, you know, since you're keeping an eye on sales and things, but you're making a lot of headway, because I am over time seeing Tequila Ocho in more bars, not just your specialized tequila bars. I mean, I was at a music venue in the Bay Area actually, and they had Ocho, you know, so you're doing something right. It just takes time.
Actually, you know what? I can add on to that, Chris. So Jesse, you hit a chord with me. I was in Lake Tahoe, South Lake Tahoe, with my family a couple of weeks ago for Thanksgiving. And there's a restaurant there called Azul Kitchen, and they have a pretty good tequila selection. And the waiter, you know, he was pushing Clase Azul and stuff like that. And I said, well, what else? You know, I saw his menu, and he says, oh, well, we have Tequila Ocho too. I go, oh, really? Which one? And he's like, what do you mean? I go, well, pretty much with Tequila Ocho, every bottle is a different terroir. It's a different thing. And so I was actually talking to the food server. Both my boys, my 16-year-old and my 11-year-old, were rolling their eyes like, oh yeah, here goes dad, you know, Mr. Tequila educator, you know, telling the waiter, blah, 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 you know. My kids are rolling their eyes, but I told them, I go, hey, go look at the bottle and look at where it actually came from. I mean, it has a lot of information on the bottle. And hopefully he became a little bit more of an educated server and can you know, talk a little bit more about the brand. But yeah, it's kind of fun, actually.
It is. I find that's either the best way to get free drinks or to get kicked out.
Well, I didn't get either. I didn't get a free drink or kicked out.
So Jesse, this is my little nephew. I'm gonna make a tequila lover too.
Amazing.
Wait a while. Just wait a couple of years, bro.
You gotta start young. Oh, actually, Jesse, I was one of those people that was very skeptical on the colors of Carlos and Felipe's masterpieces. Because when I first tried it, and again, I didn't know a lot back then, I'm like, this is not an añejo. This is a freaking reposado. Come on, what the hell? But now that I know and my palate has evolved, I do love Carlos and Felipe's products, and even more than the darker stuff, because it makes you wonder, like, I mean, I do like the complexity of the darker añejos too, but it makes you wonder, like, what am I actually really drinking? Am I drinking the tequila, or am I drinking it because I like the caramel or the influence from the sherry or the port or the cognac or everything? but I really like Tapatía, Excelencia, and Paradiso. Even though they're aged in cognac, they still have a high influence of or you can predominantly it's the agave, which I love. The way everything's just done.
Hugo's got just a tiny, looks like maybe a little ounce there left in the bottle. You better be careful, Hugo. You better drink that sooner. The angels will get that. No, I completely agree with you. And again, this is the beauty of the tequila category. I do think there's something for everyone in here. And I'm with you, Ernesto. I love Excelencia and Paradiso both. And that's really a testament, I think, to Carlos, and Scott was mentioning Felipe as well. You know, these guys are masters in what they do, and they can produce a more heavily aged tequila that still has those, you know, bright cooked agave notes, which is challenging, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean,
actually, you know what? Actually, I agree with you, Jesse. And like just the complexity of the Blanco there. I mean, so a lot of times people they like the tequilas that have the, you know, additives and stuff, and they go, well, I like the flavors. I go, you know, try some of this. You know, just a little bit of Blanco here, and it tastes like the distillery smells. I mean, you taste it, and it's like you get transported to the distillery. But I mean, the complexity. And this is just all agave. I mean, there's nothing else going on here. I mean, it's just the way you age and ferment the agave, and I mean, it creates this complexity. It's amazing.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And I think, well, we talked about production, but just to reiterate that, you know, there's 3 ingredients that go into every single drop of Tequila Ocho ever produced, and that is, you know, agaves from our own fields, water from our own spring, and yeast from the air. So that's really it. And again, it's a testament to masters like Carlos, who can work their magic, and from those 3 ingredients produce something so complex and so rich in agave flavor. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
so we were speaking about extra añejos. Ernesto, is the next one in the lineup the
was thinking about doing the Las Presas single barrel, or you want to leave that? You want to leave that for the end, since this is the highest proof.
I think we leave that one for the end, yeah, because extra añejo will still be at 40, and then we'll jump up to, what did you say? Because every 52.8. What did you say? 53.
52.5.
I can't remember. 52.5. Yeah, so jumping up a little bit there in strength. And sorry, I think I might have cut someone off. I can't see everyone on the screen, but I think someone started.
Oh, you're good. I was going to tag off Ernesto's comment and just say that, yeah, what you guys do is truly unique. One of my favorite parts is, you know, when you get somebody that's like, I want an añejo, and, you know, they're expecting 1146, you know, you're expecting that dark coloring, and it's like, well, what is this Ocho, you know, lighter, pale, and then they taste it, and it's like, you know, you got me. This is good stuff. You know, what you guys are doing, it proves them wrong, and it's kind of satisfying. And I was the same way. You know, I initially saw it and I was like, why is it so pale? But then you taste it yourself, and it's what you guys do is incredible. So, and to tag along in that with a question, if you can elaborate a little bit about the barrel selects, the transatlantic, continental, and the tropical, where'd the idea come from? And do you guys plan on doing like more of that in the future, or? It was really nice stuff. I enjoyed it a lot, all 3 of them.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so we have our core philosophy, which I think is really reflected in the core range in terms of aging, like we just discussed. But we've always, you know, I mentioned Curado, Puntas is coming out in hopefully a month. We've had a lot of delays. Everything is crazy right now with supply chain issues and things like that. But we were hoping to have Puntas out in September, but hopefully January now. But, you know, we always want to save some of our time and energy for playing around and experimenting. And you know, again, a small percentage of those experiments actually make it, you know, as limited edition releases. Most don't. but we really like this spirit of experimentation. And this is something, the Barrel Select range is something that started out of a friendship that I connected with Alexandre Gabriel, who's the owner and master distiller, master blender of Maison Ferrand. Cognac house, they produce rum and gin as well. And we started talking probably 5 or 6 years ago about doing a cask swap, a barrel swap. So we sent him 10, I think in 2016 or 2017, we sent him 10 very special barrels, of Tequila Ocho, and he sent us a mix of different cognac barrels and different former rum barrels. So the first release we did was in 2017. We just did a finish. So I took the 2017 Las Águilas Anejo, and all we did was finish that Anejo in 3 different single barrels. So there was Ferrand Cognac, Plantation Jamaica, and Plantation Barbados. So those 3 months, if you ever get those are super rare, but if you get a hold of those ever, the difference from one to the next in the 3 of that range is just 3 months of aging, which again shows they're very, very different tequilas. And it just shows people think of tequila as being so rough and kind of harsh. I think many people still think that. But when you see how these react in these types of barrels, it's such a delicate spirit, and it's so easy to overpower them, because 3 months is very, very little time. So the cask, the Barrel Select, sorry, not the Cask Select, the Barrel Select, we actually did full aging instead of finishing. So we just decided to push that a little bit further. So we aged just over a year in these different rum barrels, Fiji, Trinidad, Panama, and these ex-cognac barrels. And then Alexandre Gabriel, because we've never, ever done a blend before. That's really against our philosophy, but we also realized that we shouldn't get too stuck in our ways. And Alexandre kind of, let's say, convinced us to let him try to make a blend of Tequila Ocho using these different barrels. And so I said, all right, go for it. And, send me a sample. And we were on a call, and he said, Jesse, I've got good news and I've got bad news. I said, all right, what's the bad news? He said, I didn't create a blend. I was like, okay. He said, I created 3 blends instead. I said, great. Well, what's the good news then? It all sounds like good news to me. He said, they all taste great. They all taste very different. So he sent me blend number 1, blend number 2, blend number 3. And of course, that's not a very kind of sexy name to release them under. So I looked at all the ingredients in each one. Blend number 1 was former rum barrels and a little bit of Loma Alta, 2015, extra añejo in that blend. So I called it tropical because of the rum. Blend number 2 was a blend of different cognac casks and different rum barrels. So that became the transatlantic, because they were Caribbean rum barrels. And then the last one was all former cognac barrels. So we called it the Continental, the blend number 3. So this is just really fun. And it's just, I think, a way of showcasing. Let's see, Marco's got a bottle there. Very nice for the transatlantic. I just think it's a nice way of showcasing what you can do with aging in tequila. Again, this is not really our core part of our core philosophy, except the kind of sense of fun and experimentation and maybe even innovation. But we just like to try new things and to kind of push the envelope in that sense. So you can certainly expect more interesting experiments in the future. We have a lot of interesting barrels aging right now that, at some point next year will be añejo, and we'll figure out what to do with them once we can taste the liquid.
Some sherry.
Which Barrel Select is your favorite?
Oh, that's a tough one. I tasted them recently. I think, well, the Continental is just so easy drinking. It's a little bit too easy. It's a bit dangerous for me. I could put away probably too much of that.
Yeah,
I think the
I'm with you
tropical
there on
is
that one.
probably my favorite. Sorry, who said that? Is that Marco?
Sorry, I'm with you on that. The Continental was my
Oh,
favorite
Mitchell,
because
there
of
you go.
just
Yeah.
how beautifully smooth it. We don't like to use that word typically, but it was just too easy to drink. But that
I'm
was
with
my
you. Yeah,
favorite.
it's too easy. That's your
Yeah,
favorite.
and it was really easy to forget. It was also a high proof too, you know. Because it went down just like a regular 40. So, yeah, no, big fan of that one. Actually, a big fan of the barrel select altogether. I think that was an amazing idea, and hopefully you guys do that again in the future. Something similar.
I don't know if we're going to release. Yeah, we'll do something similar. I'm not sure. We can actually try to replicate them, but they won't be exactly the same, obviously. But we can try to replicate those same blends.
Sorry, I was gonna ask, what's the alcohol volume on the Continental?
Oh gosh, off the top of my head, it's
43.1.
43.1. Yeah.
A little bit more.
That's the lowest one. This following one is the Transatlantic at 44.2, and the Tropical is at 45.8. So
Yeah, so go ahead and taste. I think we were tasting the Extra Añejo first, and then we can go on to the barrel select range. If you haven't already tasted the Extra Añejo, as I said, that's 3 years exactly. And this to us was really, we're straddling that line of kind of being in the territory of too much oak. But to me, it's right on the border of that. And it's got this, we were talking about creaminess earlier. It's got this really nice, like custard sweetness, almost like brioche, that kind of like toasted brioche pastry note on there. And this is, again, talking about Carlos, obviously not as much age as Excelencia or Paraíso, but along that same vein of producing an Extra Añejo that still has, those agave notes front and center, I think is really masterful.
It's actually quite impressive with this Extra Añejo. This is actually the first time I've gotten to try an Ocho XA. They're hard to find in my area. I live in Vermont, which unfortunately Ocho doesn't distribute to yet. However, I'm 20 minutes from Massachusetts, so I head that way for everything. But it's to me, and I've seen a few people saying, well, which one's the XA? Because if you were to sit here and look at each one of these and go for color, you would have never guessed that was an Extra Añejo.
pretty clear.
Yeah, so light in color, but the complexity is there. I mean, and like you said, you are starting to border on that almost oaky woodiness, but the agave is still there, and for me, this pulls out a little of that baking spice, and a little almost cinnamon, nutmeggy with the caramel and everything, and this is really nice. I gotta say, I'll be hunting one down for near future.
Which one are we drinking?
Thank you very much.
the Latilla, the Extra Añejo.
All right, I'm looking at the bottles I have. That one?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I thought so, but I wasn't 100%. Okay.
Can I ask, I'm interjecting only because I haven't spoken the whole time, but can I ask a very controversial question? You mentioned something about,
Of course.
we never do charcoal distillation, and I know that like Cristalinos are very popular right now. Is that something that you are not interested in doing, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, really good question. So about charcoal filtration, or even further distillations. Some cristalinos can be an extra distillation to remove the color, which, regardless of whether it's filtration or distillation, along with the color, other things are being removed. Namely flavors and aromas, and depending on what it is, texture as well. And if you remember, we want a full flavored, full bodied
Right.
tequila, and so it really goes against our our philosophy, you know, to filter heavily or to distill more times and lose some of those flavors. I really personally, I am all for almost any kind of experimentation as long as it's not harmful in some way. So I think the Cristalino category or subclass, I guess we could call it, because technically they're Reposado Añejos and Extra Añejos. I think it's fascinating. When I first saw it, I don't know, almost 10 years ago, I just thought, wow, okay, this is going to be a fad. This will be gone in 5 or 10 years. But, you know, I was wrong, and it's become much more of a trend. And I think it's really interesting. And again, hopefully it brings us more people from vodka and other white spirit categories. So
Yeah,
I'm all
because
for
it's
these.
like aging it and then taking away flavors at the same time, right?
Well, it depends on the way they do it, right? Because there's additional distillation, there's a charcoal filtration, and then there's a chemical way to do it by taking away the color. It's, I mean, I've read up on
I
it.
don't know about that, Ernesto. I don't know about the third method, so I can't really speak to that. I've never heard that before.
I read an
Oh,
article, I don't remember
like
where, but they
different-
were saying that all those were the 3 methods, and what is it, Mi Volcan? Is, I don't know how they do it, but they were praising it because they were the only ones that did not take a lot of the flavor notes from the añejo.
So I can
Interesting.
interject
That's
a little
Volcán de
bit.
mi Tierra.
Yeah, Volcán de mi Tierra.
So what I can interject a little bit. So when I was in Monterey at the Monterey Tequila Festival in October, I had the chance to drive Herman Gonzalez back to San Jose for his flight, and we had about 2 hours together in my car. And so I was asking him about Cristalinos, and he actually told me that the whole concept of Cristalino actually came from the rum industry. So rums, a lot of like the Bacardi light rums are actually made to be a darker rum, and they filter it back down to a lighter level. And so Herman was explaining to me that the whole concept of a Cristalino actually came from the rum industry, which, by the way, it turns out rum is like the arch enemy of tequila. You know, so anybody who makes tequila, like, oh, the rum guys and stuff like that. But he explained to me the whole concept of that, where you take it, you make this very complex flavor, and then you filter it down. And for me, I mean, in the tequila industry, a Cristalino, it makes the hair on my arms stand up. I mean, it really pisses me off. But that's where the whole concept of the Cristalino comes from, is from the Bacardis, you know, like the Tequileno, or some of those where they do the column still distilling and things like that. I mean, it's no bueno. But
So I feel like what it is you had mentioned something about saying like the vodka drinkers like it, and I think maybe it's just something where like Cuervo, sorry, not brand specific, but like the gold tequilas, people don't always want gold tequilas. As a bartender, I have a lot of people who want the clear tequila. All I care about is the clear tequila, and so maybe that's where like people are going towards Cristalino, is because the color situation. Oh, I can't hear you.
when I traveled down to Guadalajara, I would see like in the clubs and stuff like that, the Cristalinos are very popular with the younger generations, and particularly with the girls, because they like it. They're like, oh, this isn't harsh. It's a very, I'm gonna say, smooth tequila. But in like the clubs in Guadalajara or Mexico City, the Cristalinos are very popular, and now it's kind of infiltrating its way up to the United States.
Yeah,
That's what I saw as well, Scott. It was really this kind of like bottle service thing, like nightclub thing, which I think is kind of passe in itself. But you're absolutely right that it's found another way of being marketed, and people are picking up on it. And again, for me, if it brings more drinkers into the agave category, great.
It's a gateway. It's a gateway. You could say the same thing about Adictivo or Casa de Oro or something like that. I mean, people who normally don't like tequila, they go, oh, wow, I didn't realize I like tequila. Well, guess what? That's not tequila, dude. But I mean, it's a gateway tequila.
If I could just interject real quick, just, everybody has a starting point. I think the Cristalinos for those non-tequila drinkers is the way or the place to start. I used to drink Don Julio 70, and that kind of got me hooked. And now, I'll be very honest, somebody comes over to the place, I have it because they're like, oh, I want to try that tequila. It's like, but there's way better stuff than that.
But the Julio 70 was made a lot better when it first started.
Yeah.
So it's just, but it's a starting point.
I like that you're saying that, because I have, as a bartender, have a lot of people who do not like tequila because they've not enjoyed tequila, and I sometimes recommend Cristalinos because they are higher end. They have a little bit better flavor sometimes, depending on the brand, but
yeah, exactly that. But
introducing them to something different than the brands that they're used to, and that's what I enjoy doing, is selling brands that people aren't familiar with just based on marketing and expanding their horizons.
Or letting people's palates evolve is what I tell them. It's like you have to it's an acquired taste. You gotta want to taste the agave. You gotta smell it. You gotta taste it.
Yeah.
Sip it. Don't just,
Right. Exactly.
Flip it and go from there. So those are my 2 cents with, the people that I have coming over to my place. And, I'll always have the Cristalino, like Don Julio 70. I'm running out of it, but myself, something like Ocho, I'll definitely have to stock up on it.
Well, that's because you all know, tequila well. I mean, it's for those people who, like you said, somebody said, gateway and everything. I mean, it's a lot better than having them, drink Cuervo Gold or El Jimador or whatever, all the other things and everything. At least there are so many people I know that say, oh, I hate tequila. And then I give them something and they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know it could be that way. So if it's like Cristalino, great. It just opens up their world. And then hopefully in time they find the Tequila Ochos of the world.
Yep. I did a in-person tasting at somebody's house, and I brought different kinds of better tequilas. And some of these people were like, no, I don't want to drink this. This reminds me of my high school and college years. I'm like, yeah, I did that too. We all did a lot of stupid things, and we got drunk and we shot half a bottle, whatever. I'm like, just give it a try. At the end, everybody loved it, They were like, no shit. I didn't know tequila could actually taste this good.
Yeah.
It's just the whole thing of educating and telling them why this, why that, why not this, why not that, And I think if you being a bartender, if you put the Cristalino and you put something like Ocho Extrañejo or something next to it and have them taste both of them, they're gonna be like, no shit, this is very good. That's the way I do it.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, Sarah, you being a bartender, you're on the front line. I mean, you're actually converting people. You're a brand ambassador or a tequila ambassador. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, getting new tequila drinkers that maybe were drinking vodka or something like that. I mean, that's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. Always educating myself.
So I'm actually in real estate. In my closing gift, actually, I give them a bottle of Don Pilar Extra Añejo that Don Pilar signs, because I live very close to him. He's a friend of mine, and people drink that and they're like, oh, wow, this is actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. And, because let's face it, I mean, a gift basket with the green grass and the shitty crackers and the dry salami is a horrible, housewarming gift, But
you need to tell more real estate people to do that, please.
Right?
I'll hook you up, bro.
Can I get a little clarification there?
Go to all the house openings that you have and get that.
Hey, Scott, like green grass, what are you talking about?
I think we have to buy
the little gift baskets. They have that green plastic grass and the dry cracker.
Okay, I thought since you were in California, you were talking about the other kind of grass.
No. But I mean, it's stupid. And you open the box of cookies, it's like a big box, and there's only 2 cookies in there. I mean, it's a huge disappointment.
Well, the Don Pilar Añejo is
Tequila's the way to go, Scott.
But Don Pablo Anejo is like the best bang for the buck for $40.
Actually, you know what? If you go to Costco, you can get it for $29. But I'm
Not in Seattle.
Oh,
We got like 30% fees and.
Oh, okay. Well, I grew up in Redmond, Washington, so I know that area. But I
Sorry
moved
to
down to
interrupt,
California.
guys, but let's try to keep on moving because it's almost 2 or 3 in the morning for Jesse. So let's let's go ahead and continue with the other.
I'm actually 3 hours ahead of you guys, but I do need to jump off in the next kind of 10 minutes or so. But I've really enjoyed this, guys. So I think, Ernesto, what do we have left to taste?
We got
Just
the
the 3 barrel selects
Continental.
and then the single barrel.
Yeah, Continental the Continental, the Tropical, and the single barrel.
Can I ask a quick question, Jesse?
Awesome.
Because I got to leave in a minute
Of
too,
course,
and I know
Chris.
we all have to. I was curious. So, am I understanding correctly? You're based, or you were based in London?
Still based in London, yeah.
Oh, okay, I love it. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. And I usually, in a typical non-COVID times, I'm usually there about every 2 years or so for a variety of reasons. But wondering if you could recommend a tequila, but like, what's your favorite tequila bars there?
Oh, well, let me know, Chris, when you go next. I mean, we have a bar that that my dad opened in '82 in London. So
Oh, it's still there. I
Oh,
didn't know
where
that.
is
gonna be
that?
full-
I want to go to
it's
London.
still
I want
there.
to know what that is.
Yeah, so please, guys. I mean, by all means, just give me some notice if you're coming to London. I would love to host you guys, anyone, here at Cafe Pacifico. It's in Covent Garden, so 5 Langley Street, right near the tube station. But Pink Chihuahua is a fun one. It's or El Camion. It's a fun one. It's maybe not. Actually, they do have a huge selection of vintage tequilas, but I don't know how many of those they actually sell. Mestizo is kind of a fun place. They have a really nice selection. Terrible cocktails. Don't order a margarita there. But they have really
Good to
good
know.
food
I've
as
heard of
well.
that place, but I'm glad to know that. Yeah.
No. They've got a really nice selection, but don't bother with the cocktails. Really nice food as well. It's not like the U.S. There's not a huge selection of Mexican
Well, that's why I
places. I'm
asked
trying to
you, because
think.
I mean, I've been to a couple of Mexican places. And they've been okay, but I figured you'd know.
Go to Hacha is a new one. Hacha, Hacha. They've got 2 locations, one in Dalston and one in Brixton. And that's a really cool concept. What Dino actually used to be the global brand ambassador for Don Julio for years, but he's always been into his more craft tequilas, let's say. And he has a very cool program there, both with cocktails and rotating agave spirit selection. So but let me know if you guys, anyone is planning a trip to London. And
I will.
actually, before I forget, Scott, are you in front of a green screen there, or is that the actual
This is my
backdrop
bar.
at your
This is
place?
my bar. Here.
Right, that's
You want me to
beautiful.
grab you
Where
a
is
bottle?
that?
I was gonna say, I think we all need to go visit Scott. He's got the best agave spirits bar.
That's
in,
beautiful.
It's
probably
all
in the
it's all
world.
smoke and mirrors.
Aw.
It's all smoke and mirrors. I can go anywhere I want in the world.
Oh, it is a green screen. It's a very convincing
No.
It's
green
actually
screen.
pretty close. It's pretty close to what he's really got at home, and he's always willing to share. Scott's a great guy.
Actually, you know what? Marco's been to my place. I got an underground tequila bunker. If you guys are ever in the Bay Area, South Bay, come on by. We'll pull out a bottle and open something up.
Several.
Excellent.
Several
Yeah.
trip to
I'm
Scott's
good.
house.
I'm down there a lot, actually.
Well, I guess I can
Chris,
say
Chris, you must know John Welsh, right?
John Welsh
Yeah.
from this stuff.
John's been here like numerous times. Last time
I've seen him on. I've never met in person, but I know
I know John. He and Cindy live about 20 minutes away from us. And we haven't seen him since before COVID.
Yeah,
But
I know
I'd love-
Christine and John well.
I'd love anybody who's in the Bay Area. I'd love to welcome you to my house and open up a interesting bottle.
All right.
So go to Casa de Perry.
Absolutely.
So Jesse, I want to just put a bug in your ear before you have to leave. Seeing as how you're the marketing guru for Ocho, you should really work on 802 spirits for Vermont here, and They need to start distributing Ocho. Unfortunately, I think Vermont.
Say that
up in
again, Mitchell. Work on who? You said something spirits. I couldn't make out what you
802
said.
spirits, because Vermont's one of them regulatory states. It's controlled by the state. The liquor commissioner board, or whatever you want to call it, it's called 802 spirits.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm limited to all the big brands, and to be honest, there's very few traditional brands in Vermont, and it's sad and it's upsetting. But
You're 20 minutes away from whatever state, right?
Mass. I'm actually about 20 to 30 minutes from Mass, New Hampshire, and New York. So
in Bay Area, 20 minutes would be a killer commute, dude. I mean,
yeah,
20 minutes is nothing.
I know.
Make the drive, bro.
I do. But it would be nice to see Vermont itself, the bar. Say I go to a bar in Vermont, they can't commission liquors from any other state. So any bar you go to in Vermont, they're limited. I get Tamarina or any of those. Not to laugh at it. I think he really tried hard to make a decent tequila there, but no, it's for me. You even go to the bigger cities like Burlington or Montpelier, or Rutland, and the selection's no different. So it would be great to see it in Vermont.
And that's been a huge battle since we launched the control states, because my dad lived in Oregon and we couldn't even get it into the OLCC, the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. It's just it's an uphill battle. We will get there.
I'm sorry.
I don't know when.
No worries.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? Like each state can only I feel like you can only get certain liquors in different states. Like when I was in Michigan, I recommended Tequila Ocho to the bar that I worked at, and they were like, we can't even get it here. So what is that? Just like state by state, you can't? You have to pay? What is
That's a great question. And to be honest, there's a lot of and Jesse could probably answer it better than I can, but there's a lot of control states, and what happens is the state government creates a board of commissioners that really basically regulate what comes into the state for alcohols, quantities of such, and where it goes in Vermont as well. So it's strange because I can get, say, Whistle Pig. Well, Whistle Pig's made right here in Vermont, so I guess that's a bad.
Yeah, but so in terms of tequila, so Jesse, like in terms of tequila, why is that regulated like in the U.S.?
It's something called the 3-tier system, and from what I've understood, it's left over from Prohibition days. So legally, well, there's the 3-tier system, and then each state is totally different on top of that. So there can't be any one of the same entities doing more than one of these 3 tiers, which is importation, distribution, and retail. So you're always going to have a distributor for a different state. So, we import Tequila Ocho into the US, but we cannot then distribute it ourselves, right? We have to use a distributor. Then some states, it's the government that acts as the distributor, which is, I believe Mitchell is saying is the case for Vermont. It's the case for Oregon. I think there's about 10 or 11 or 12 control states still. So it's, and ultimately they make the decision. So you have, like Mitchell said, this commission.
What kind of liquor you can get.
Correct. That's exactly right. In the case of those control states.
You have to put the pressure on the distributor, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Well,
no,
again,
unfortunately, government. It's
right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Government ones. Yeah.
In Vermont, it's a commission board by the government of Vermont, the state government, and unfortunately, they're not very good at tequila.
Go to your legislature and make change.
Right? That's what I should do. You're right. I should levy and vote. Well,
yeah.
Try and get on the liquor board there. So I should be head of commission.
Mitchell, can you do mail order though there? You can.
No.
You
No.
can't. Oh, see,
Yep,
Idaho's that
state
way too.
Shipping's, all shipping in the state is prohibited for any sort of alcohol. The only time it opened up was during COVID.
John's running. John, great to see you. Sorry to interrupt. John, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
So,
Guys, I think we're gonna because I'm gonna have to jump off in a few minutes too, and I think we're down to the last dozen or so people. And one thing I just wanted to mention, Mitchell, you mentioned Camarena tequila. That's Carlos's cousins or second cousins. So they have a distillery in the next town over, Jesus Maria. Camarena tequila has nothing to do with Carlos. And
no.
Felipe,
I know that. No, I was saying Tamarena.
You know
Rock,
that, yeah.
The Rock. What the Rock was cooking there.
Terramana.
Yeah, Terramana. Sorry. I looked in briefly into what he's trying to do there, and I might get there at some point. But as far as I know, it's additive free. It's just a very rough around the edges. They don't have the recipe down right yet, and he's got some work to do for sure.
Strange taste and stuff.
Yeah. Didn't the brand sell already?
It could have.
Because I mean, I know Karina. She's the niece of Felipe and Carlos, and she told me that it used to be owned by them, but they sold it. Could be wrong though.
Which one? Sorry, Ernesto. Which one?
The Camarena brand.
I think it may be partially owned by Gallo. I don't know how much of a stake they have. I don't know if it's a controlling majority stake, but I do believe they have a significant stake in that brand. But again, that was the cousins, so I'm not sure what agreement they have with Gallo. So guys, there's still 4. Unfortunately, I am going to have to jump off now, but there's 4 tequilas left to taste. We already talked about the barrel select, what they are. You've got barrel select, tropical. The order that I like doing it in is kind of the one that I received it in, which is blend number 1, 2, and 3, which is tropical, transatlantic, and continental, which is actually going in the opposite direction of ABV, so it goes high to low. But I actually enjoy drinking it that way. The tropical to me has those really funky, that kind of high ester rum funk to it, which I really enjoy. Really like that nice fruit from the rum coming through. Transatlantic, you get a bit of both worlds, that kind of dried fruit from the cognac and the nice fruit, fresh fruit from the rum. And then continental, like Mitchell was saying. And that's going to be the last one you taste. The continental is then just like chocolate, hazelnuts, creamy, very easy drinking. And then the last one you have that Christine just had on the screen is Las Presas 2018 single barrel añejo, which is cask strength. So in this case, 52.5 if memory serves %. So enjoy those, guys, and please do keep in touch. I'm going to put I think some of us are friends on Facebook and different things, but I'm going to put my email in just in case, so you guys have it. Email is always an easy one for me anyway. And guys, again, I want to thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure to get to interact a bit more directly with you guys, and I hope we can do this again. Ernesto, maybe we'll talk about
Puntas.
Doing a tasting for puntas. Yeah. So maybe you and I can organize that together. But yeah, let's do something again next year, because clearly 2.25 hours is not enough. So Paul, everyone, Mitchell, Chris, Sarah, Hugo, Sharon, Marco, really, really nice to see you all. Christine and John. Nice to see you, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse. Hey,
Thank you, Ernesto.
You got a big day, right? You got a wedding to attend, so I'm sure you'll have plenty of fun.
Thank you, man.
No
Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
Jesse.
Bye, all.
Shasta, you'll be
Bye,
drinking
Christine.
Shasta.
Adios.